All right, so Clay Holmes, little late night magic on Friday. This is not the former New York Yankee everyone's been waiting for, but Clay Holmes, 3 years, $39 million, as reported by Jeff Passan. We're here to give you our instant and immediate reaction. James has kind of been talking about this one for a minute, and especially now with the new wrinkle that Jeff Passan put out, that Clay Holmes will be used as a starter for the New York Mets. I mean, James, David Stearns, he's listening. He has to be listening to this podcast.
Either he's listening or we're just so inside of his head that we can forecast all these moves before they're going to happen. It's all the exact reasons we said this was going to happen. The fact that you could get someone who possibly has legitimate starter upside at way under starter market value price, and just he has all the tools in his tool bag to be a successful starter. And the fact that all these relievers that are in the major league, they were all starters for most of their life. Clay Holmes was a starter until like 3.5 years ago, 4 years ago. So he's not that long removed from doing it. He's a hoss. He's a massive dude. He has tons of really good pitches. He was super effective his career at the Yankees. I know he got a lot of shit for blowing saves, which we hate. We don't want blown saves, but he was awesome. He was literally, for the last 3 years, one of the most effective relief pitchers in baseball. Like, truly, when you break it all down, one of the 15 best, most effective relievers in baseball. So you put all that together, got a lot of undue hate. He's coming to us below market value for a starter. I love this move.
And I think at the end of the day, too, let's just, in a world where the starter thing doesn't work, because I think that's a possibility.
For sure.
I know you're leaning towards that this could be a good thing.
We'll go down both avenues, yeah.
But $13 million a year for the next 3 years, he'll just be an expensive reliever at the back end of this bullpen, which wouldn't be the worst thing either, because we know how people, and us included, would freak out at the time at the end of the year when Phil Maytown would come in to get big outs. So either way, you either zig or you zag here, and it feels like it's just overall a good move by the Mets. This is also the first free agent prediction I've gotten right this offseason. Check my video on my YouTube channel, Draft Neck Mark. Clay Holmes to the Mets. I called it.
Yeah, totally. This is Andrew Heaney money. This is Ross Stripling money. This is Kyle Freeland money. This is what we gave Sean Manaea and Luis Severino last year. And then also like slightly less than Raisel Iglesias makes, Kenta Maeda. Like, this is Robert Stevenson's almost the same as the Robert Stevenson contract last year. So this is in the range of well above average reliever to well below average starter. So with that, you kind of figure that Clay Holmes' floor is still a well above average reliever.
Yes.
If you're paying Clay Holmes $1 million less than Raisel Iglesias a year for fewer years, you don't really feel that bad about it. And then if you're paying him basically the same amount of money as Andrew Heaney, and he becomes an actual mid-rotation starting pitcher, suddenly you're like, oh my God, this was a coup. We just made out like bandits.
So then let's talk about him as a starting pitcher, because I think everybody understands what he'll be as a reliever as of right now. But as a starting pitcher, the questions that I had when we first brought this up was just he's a sinker ball pitcher. And he's a guy who his stuff got better when he made that switch with the Yankees and became more of a sinker ball pitcher, focusing on that in the bullpen. Sinker ball slider, right? I believe was kind of what he was rocking.
Sinker ball sweeper, gyro slider.
Does it transition well as a starting pitcher?
I think totally. I think the sinker baller thing is huge, because we talked about this a couple episodes ago, and we talked about bargain starting pitchers, relievers that could become starters, why it could work for Clay Holmes. Clay Holmes has a 68.6 ground ball percentage since the beginning of the 2022 season. That would be by far the highest for any starting pitcher, and it's the second highest for any reliever. The only reliever with a higher ground ball rate was Andre Palante from the Cardinals, who they made a starter. And it went up and down a little bit. This stuff's nowhere near as good as Clay Holmes, but it objectively kind of worked for most of the time. So the fact that, just thinking about this, pulling it back from a logic sense, when you're pitching 1 inning at a time versus 5 innings at a time, the ground balls are working worse when you have these 1 inning samples, because a lot more randomness can happen inside of 1 inning. If you give up a ground ball to slightly the wrong spot, or even the right spot for Yankees infield that was objectively horrible at defense, besides Anthony Volpe, you're in a much worse spot. Suddenly you have a man on first. Now you got to play differently. A lot of things can snowball quickly in 1 inning when you give up a lot of contact. And Clay Holmes gives up a lot of contact. It's not very good contact. Honestly, it's very bad contact, but just contact in general works worse as a reliever. That's why people want their closers to get strikeouts. That's why a guy like Edwin Diaz is so valuable. Josh Hader, when Ryan Presley was at his peak. And that's why Emmanuel Clase kind of had to go through his own metamorphosis to become more of a strikeout guy in the last year, or else he was never going to reach the true ceiling of being the best reliever in baseball, like he now obviously is. So just the fact that when you boil it all down, Clay Holmes is an ultra ground ball getter. That works much better for 150 innings than it works for 60.
Yeah, and when you explained that to me over text like a couple of days ago when this came up, we were even talking about it as Clay Holmes as a possible starter, which is insane how our brain works, where it's like a Tuesday, I'm going into the city, I'm texting James like, what do you think about Clay Holmes as a starter? You think that's real? Like, that's just the conversations we have off the podcast, which is why we do the podcast here. But expanding it over the 150 innings, it totally makes more sense. And it's even the thing of like, how we preach about the hitters that we want on this team. We want guys that hit the ball in the air. We want guys that drive the baseball. When you hit the ball on the ground, when Francisco Alvarez was hitting the ball on the ground earlier in the year, we were like, we don't love this, because really the best damage you're going to do on a ground ball is a single. You keep the ball out of the air, you keep the ball in the ballpark, especially with the good defense that the Mets have. This can be a recipe for success for Clay Holmes.
An easy recipe for success. Another thing I mentioned at the top is that he is built like a starting pitcher. The dude's 6'5", 250.
It's huge. He's
like
so
that,
gangly.
Like that's a body that can stand up to the starter's workload. Then you like get deep and like really get into the nitty gritty of all these pitches. First of all, that sinker, which when we talked about Hoffman and Holmes, mostly talked about Hoffman, but I mentioned Holmes briefly, becoming a starter, you're worried about the fastball velocity dropping. Because, of course, when you're pitching, again, 4, 5, 6 innings rather than 1 or 2 innings, you're going to lose a couple ticks on that fastball. The fact that Holmes sits 97, gets it up to 98, 99, he's probably going to settle in around 95 miles an hour, which is above average velocity for a starting pitcher. So right there, bang, like that's one huge check box for why a reliever can become a starter. Second of all, the next thing we need for a check box, he has really good command. Holmes doesn't walk a lot of batters. I think he walked a few more batters as a reliever than he would as a starter, similar to what I was talking about before, where it's like it gets a little more tense in those late innings, so you kind of rather walk a guy than give up some hard contact. So I think he was maybe a little working around the edges more than he would there, but above average zone rate, threw pitches in the strike zone more than league average, a couple of percentage points more than league average. So I think that's a big checkbox. Next checkbox, probably the most important checkbox, is that his 3 pitches that he spammed as a closer, his sinker, his sweeper, and his gyro slider, are all super elite outlier pitches in their own right. The sinker, especially, is probably one of the most unique pitches in baseball. This is all coming from Lance Brozdowski's video about why Clay Holmes and Jeff Hoffman could be successful starters. They put out like a month and a half ago.
Lance.
Yeah, he'd been mentioning that. Ben Brewster from Tread had been mentioning this, who actually trains Clay Holmes. So I think this has been a real thing that they've been doing. And Eli Ben Perrat of Baseball America, they've all been saying Clay Holmes starter, Clay Holmes starter. Some of them thinking he has legit ace-type potential. I don't know if I'm going to go there. Yes. I don't know if I'm going to get there yet, but I'm just telling you guys why he could be a successful starter.
Be pretty fucking awesome if he is.
That would literally change my life if he is. But
Juan Soto changes our life. Clay Holmes will make it better. Easy.
Yes. Well, we're not there yet. We're not there yet. It's still Friday night. We don't know what's going to happen at the end of the weekend. But this is a stat right from Lance's video. For all right-handed pitchers, Holmes is the only one with a sinker that had a release height higher than 6.4 feet and below 5 inches of inverted vertical break. And just to give the comparisons, Holmes only had 4.4 inches of inverted vertical break on that sinker and a 6.6 foot release height. So yeah, more than 6.5 feet release height. Mostly because he's just a hoss and he has a really up and down release point on that whenever he throws a pitch. But what that really means is that, and a much simpler thing is, Clay Holmes' sinker drops way more than the pitch is expected to drop based on the way it comes out of his hand. It's surprising to hitters, and it will continue to be surprising to hitters because where his arm angle is and the way he's throwing that pitch, it just drops much more than the hitters can ever expect. That's why he can spam that pitch over and over and over again, and it never, ever gets pieced up. And it makes him able to throw that pitch against both righties and lefties at a really, really, really effective way. And that's going to be one of the most important things to making him a starter.
Yeah, I mean, when becoming a starter, that's kind of the difference between right now a modern major league starter and a guy in the past is like they didn't really think about this. Can he get left-handed batters? Can he get right-handed batters out thing? But Clay Holmes can do both. And again, we're not even really a year removed from him being one of the most dominant relievers in Major League Baseball the last couple seasons. Ever since he stepped into the Bronx with the Yankees, he's been incredible. Over a 3.5-4 year stretch, a 2.69 ERA, a WHIP at 1.1, a FIP at 2.74. Like these numbers over 200 innings. Again, of course, this is Turbo Clay Holmes, him as a reliever, throwing 98 miles an hour. He was great. And I know he lost the closer role to Luke Weaver by the end of the year. I think that was more of a vibes thing. The vibes were very off at that point with Clay Holmes, and Luke Weaver had been the guy getting big outs. But even think about the games when like the Mets played the Yankees at the stadium. When he come in the game, we're like, shit. Yeah, this is a really, really hard guy to piece up. You kind of almost have to walk and get a couple lucky hits to get the ball through the infield and score a run. It's very difficult.
That big size he has, the big extension, that crazy arm angle, it makes him a very uncomfortable at bat. It always did. I give the Yankees a lot of credit for what they did with him when they kind of made him into this monster.
Found him out of nowhere. He stunk with the Pirates. He was horrible.
It was, I think, a mid-season trade in 2021 from out of nowhere where they traded, I want to say it was like Hoy Park.
No,
And
yeah, it was Diego Castillo and Hoy
Hoy Park,
in
yeah.
2021 for Clay Holmes. And it's like,
psychotic. I just pulled that name out, but
yeah,
I
Hoy
remember
Park.
writing it up at the time, being like, I think Clay Holmes, because that was when I was doing that thing, like the 5 best relievers you never heard of, and I think that
Yes.
Clay Holmes did it because immediately the Yankees got rid of his curveball, which was getting hit very hard, and they gave him the sweeper, which has become one of the best in baseball in terms of vertical movement, horizontal movement, swing and miss stuff. It's completely ridiculous, and a gyro slider, and the gyro slider is a real big key here. I talk about that in the show a lot. It's a slider that kind of falls over itself, but spins side to side, so it just kind of topples over, like spinning like a bullet. It's really good also against righties and lefties. So that pitch is going to be foundational into what he's going to be able to do as a starter. And something that was crazy to me when looking into this before we did this episode, he threw that gyro slider more often than his sweeper to right-handed batters. That's how disgustingly platoon neutral that pitch was, and how when you get into a bat against him against a righty, you're kind of done. You look like you really don't have anything to do with that sweeper. With the sinker, sweeper, gyro. It's just everything comes at you in the same arm angle. They all look exactly the same until the last second. It's amazing. And then I think something is also going to be really, really, really important for Clay Holmes becoming a starter is just simply leaving Yankee Stadium for Citi Field.
Would be huge.
Massive, because something the Yankees also did with him was they got rid of the four-seam fastball and spammed the sinker. I think that sometimes teams like the Yankees, the Dodgers do this too with lots of fastballs low in the zone. I think teams, and maybe rightfully so, get obsessed with their home ballpark and how they're going to tell their pitchers to game plan. If Clay Holmes is throwing a mid four-seam fastball and you have a 310-foot fence in right field when the lefties come up, but like when the lefties come up, we'll already have a beat on Clay Holmes because you don't really have a breaking ball that's really going to be dominant against them. Just the gyro slider, which is very good against them. You can sit on that fastball, and again, it's not good, so you can easily just pop it in the air and you get that over the fence. Suddenly, in the ninth inning, it's game's over because you just gave up a home run in the ninth inning. I think coming to a place like Citi Field, it might give him a little more breathing room to throw that four-seam fastball because he's going to need another pitch if if this is going to really go crazy, whether it be the fastball, which he started throwing a little bit more in the playoffs, whether it's a changeup, but the changeup's going to be a weird thing for him to do because when he throws, it's called supination, where his wrist goes outward, his thumb flicks away from his body, rather than guys whose thumb flicks towards their body, towards the middle of their body. It's just harder to throw a changeup that way. And also, the Yankees are so good at teaching guys new pitches, especially changeups.
Super good.
The fact that it took 3 years, he never got a hold of one, makes me think maybe he can't get a hold of one. So maybe it's just bring that curveball back to show it once in a while and then show a fastball, maybe try the splitter like Reed Garrett. I don't know, but he's going to need another pitch, but I think there's a lot more wiggle room for him to learn a new pitch when he's not playing a Little League ballpark.
We grabbed the Yankees guy too, right? Didn't we just grab him?
Trishelle, yeah, I was going to mention that. The Yankees assistant pitching coach, who I'm sure that's part of this conversation. I'm sure he's like, yeah, he can definitely be a starter. I can do this, I can do that. The guy's worked for him for 3 years. Also forgot he worked with Montas as well, which I just clicked to me in my brain. But yeah, two former Yankees pitchers now going to be in the middle of our rotation. I just think there's a lot of ways to make this work for Clay Holmes.
Yeah, no,
I think for the money it costs, like I just said before, it seems to me that there's a lot more upside than downside in this deal.
I mean, we just saw Luis Severino, who loved Luis Severino. He was great last year. He just signed a $23 million a year contract with the Athletics. They're not
Athletics.
Just the Athletics. ATH. That's their thing. The pitching market's out of control. The pitching market's crazy expensive right now. I don't know what happened. I guess you're just paying for innings. To be able to possibly get starting pitching innings out of Clay Holmes this year, it is totally worth the risk because at the absolute worst, you just get a nasty reliever again, which we could use more of.
Yeah, and this contract and how good he is makes it worthwhile for him to just be a nasty reliever. But as a starter, the upside becomes
insane,
kind of limitless. And it was interesting. I don't know if you saw it today. I know you've been off Twitter. Frankie Montas said literally in his Zoom press conference joining the Mets that he spoke to Sean Manaea and Severino about being with the Mets and what it was. And he said they gave him confidence that they can help him pitch design, help with development, and help him stay healthy. He mentioned that specifically. So we're now, like we predicted this season, you said it first. The Mets are now have this shine on them where pitchers are like, oh, I can go to the Mets for a year and then I will make more money than I could have ever imagined on the other side of that. Like Luis Severino just got $70 million guaranteed. Last year, he barely got Drew Smiley
from
money.
A team that doesn't spend any money.
It's the highest paid player in the history of the Athletics ever.
It's crazy.
You know who's second highest paid player in the history of the Athletics?
Eric Chavez. Yes.
There you go. Breaking full circle. Back Mets and Yankees all together here. But I think all of that comes together and makes, again, a lot of upside for Clay Holmes. But we have to say why this could not work. It's definitely possible it doesn't work. It's always possible it doesn't work.
Sure.
First of all, this is a massive adjustment. He's been a reliever full-time for like 4 years now. It's going to be a lot in his arm. He hasn't thrown more than, I think, 65 innings the last 3 years, so it's going to be a big jump up for him. I wonder how much they're going to push him past 115, 120 innings. Like, I wonder how...
Most he's ever thrown in a year is 70, by the way.
Check the minors.
Ooh, okay, I'll check the minors, too. You keep talking.
So I think that's a big deal here. Another thing is that Clay Holmes, because what the pitches he had, what?
Minors 2016, he threw 136. 2017,
Okay.
he threw 112. I will say in AAA in 2017 as a starting pitcher, he had a 3.36 ERA. So
Okay.
I mean, it's not majors, but that's proof of him pitching at a starting pitching level.
Oh, we'll for sure take that. The other thing that worries me about Clay Holmes, which is why I keep talking about learning a new pitch, kind of understanding your ballpark a little bit, is that he just simply is not. He doesn't have a great bag against lefties.
No.
But I mean, this, like I said this all the time about Severino last year too. He got through a whole season with 3.80 ERA. But with Clay Holmes last year against lefties, it was stark. He had a 24% whiff rate against lefties, 36% against righties. Righties had a 238 batting average and 361 slugging. Lefties had a 258 batting average and 333 slugging. So still low slugging because of all the sinkers. And then lefties had a 311 xWOBA. 311 xWOBA, and righties had a 254 xWOBA. He was better, significantly better than league average across the board against righties and worse against lefties, especially in the swing and miss department, which again, that's much worse in the 9th inning than the 4th inning. So yes. I think that's going to be a big deal here. But the one way that this doesn't work out for Clay Holmes in a really good way is if no more pitches can develop, at least even just a show. Like even if you can just show off a curveball and a fastball, that's enough. Yeah, it's enough to confuse him a little bit. That was how Seth Lugo has done these crazy things in the last few years. He'll just go out there and throw 9 different pitches. Like some of them aren't even good. Most of them aren't even good.
No,
which is the exact opposite. Yeah, exact opposite thing we used to say about him when he was a reliever here. But I guess he was just always trying to be a starter. So and he was right. And the hat tip to Seth Lugo. Maybe this is just the divine. In it, like this is the kickback. This is the karma for all the Seth Lugo bullshit that we dealt with over the years and missing out on that. But the one way this doesn't work out for Clay Holmes is if the starter's workload is too much for him initially, but I trust his starting workload in the minor leagues and just his big body to do that. And if there's no more weapons that can be developed to help him against left-handed batters.
Yeah, and I think those are all very fair concerns, like to not just be the overly positive guys like we've been told about Frankie Montas. Like there are things that can go wrong here. There are things to monitor, but luckily we seem to have one of the best pitching development in all of Major League Baseball. We seem to have the best pitching coach maybe in all of Major League Baseball, and Jeremy Hefner. And we just got the guy from the Yankees who's been given a lot of credit, who's probably an integral reason as to why Clay Holmes is on this team as well.
Totally. And across the Yankees' whole organization, this is crazy. They've lost 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 coaches between their major league and minor league teams so far this offseason.
That's so many.
That's an exodus. That is a very big deal. And we got the one who was from their major league team, who a lot of those pitchers credit a lot with their improved pitch design and game planning, which is massive.
One more exodus that matters from that New York Yankees team.
One more that matters a lot. And we can't get through an episode without talking about Juan Soto, so I do want to do 2 minutes here to close.
Real quick, yeah.
How this can possibly actually affect Juan Soto, because I galaxy brained for the first second I saw this, where I was like, oh, this is the kind of move you make when you're probably not going to throw hard on an ace at the end of the offseason. You're probably not going to throw hard on an ace at the end of the offseason if you've built a really good mid-rotation and you just spent $700 million on a right fielder.
There it is.
That, I would be lying if that didn't cross my mind.
TikTok yesterday, talking about 15 years, $700 million, and then all of a sudden the account is deleted. I mean, you can't make this up. The Mets were so close to having nothing. I think the deleting of the account only further confirms that was for sure his son, and he said something he was not supposed to.
And if you guys are also just deep on Twitter all day long, you saw the account Anthony03465666. Yeah, be like, here, I'm posting this on a burner account so I don't get in trouble. If you want to take it with a grain of salt, you can. I'm told Juan Soto made a decision, Mets, blah, blah, blah. I'm not going to take that seriously. Whoever did that burner, though,
awesome.
They might be listening to the show because they did a hilarious thing with this burner. You haven't been perpetually online today like I have been. So the burner's name is Anthony, and it followed 3 people initially. It was Major League Baseball, Jeff Passan, and Anthony DeComo.
Oh.
And then they unfollowed Anthony DeComo within the last couple of hours.
Ooh, nice. So, that's good.
Little spicy. But then also
breadcrumbs.
Yeah. Then the last thing, though, I do think that this, and we've been saying it all offseason, so it's not a surprise. I think this is the last stake right there that we're not going to go after Corbin Burns. We're not going to go after Max Fried. We saw Shane Bieber sign a contract for Matt Boyd money on Friday afternoon. It's just, I think that we knew it, but I think this fully takes the Mets out of it. And again, thinking about,
just did it.
And also, they might have just gotten legitimate 3 and 4 starters combined for under $30 million.
Yeah,
where Luis Severino is getting more, almost that much, not almost that much, but he's getting 70% of that much next year himself.
Yeah, and again, the eyes on the prize. It's all about Juan Soto.
If
you don't get Juan Soto, this pitcher talk could be completely moot, and they might be like, "We got to go get Corbin Burns. We got to go get Max Fried." It might turn into that, but
or The other
Or
side of that is if you don't get Juan Soto, which is something that I think is becoming an increasingly long possibility. Not that we don't get Soto, but I think that the pivot would be not let's spend as much money as we can. The pivot is let's do what we did last year, but with no dead money, and let's see if we can actually make the playoffs under the luxury tax.
let's be the Brewers.
Let's be the Milwaukee Mets with Francisco Lindor.
Don't say that. Don't say that. We got to end that now. I can't have any more Milwaukee talk in this. Guys, Clay Holmes has signed with the Mets 3 years, $39 million. That's our immediate reaction. That's our take. Thank you so much for listening and watching. Make sure you follow us on all our social media at Mets'd on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. Subscribe to the Mets'd Podcast YouTube channel. See the video version of this. Drop a like on the video as well. If you are listening, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google, drop us a rating, drop us a review, and subscribe. James, where's your Twitter?
James_Shiano.
I'm Giraffe Neck Mark with a C. Thank you guys for listening. Thank you for watching. Hopefully we're talking to you about Juan Soto as a Met very, very soon. Peace out.
Peace out. Hopefully see you guys tomorrow.